Hello everybody and welcome back to the Sonic and the Black Knight playthrough. It's time to start our journey through Camelot Castle. And there's all sorts of goodies to get here. Sort of. New skills, I suppose, is probably the most accurate way of describing it. Now you may have already realised, Sonic and the Black Knight moves at a rather breakneck pace. Quite fitting considering, we're playing as the world's fastest hedgehog. But it certainly got Black Knight into quite a bit of trouble, shall we say, when it came to reviews. Because, Black Knight did not review well. Which is a shame, because it's actually a really halfway decent game. It's got flaws, but it's not bad at all. But so on Metacritic it's sitting at 54 out of 100. Yeah, so the most infamous review for the game was by IGN, with Matt Casamassina praising the game's visuals and overall presentation, but stating the gameplay is broken and the controls are unresponsive. I disagree with that. There's a delay on the sword swing, but outside of that, the controls do tend to, actually work. I believe that IGN review is also infamous because it stated how short the game was, and it seemed as though the writer hadn't played past the first credits, because Sonic and the Black Knight tricks you with a credit sequence, what is essentially the middle of the game, and requires you to go back in, and it's a bit awkward. You have Game Daily criticising repetitive combat, easy missions, and limited control, but acknowledging attractive presentation, decent combat, and bonus content. And yeah, that's generally the thing, but for some reason it got marked just really low across the board. I think it's just because a lot of critics were very fond of criticising Sonic the Hedgehog in that period of time. So even had this game done everything right, it still would have ranked lower than it should have done. When Sonic 06 starts to rank more highly than Unleashed Black Knight, sort of, in most instances, there's bias going on, because there is no way that Black Knight is worse than Sonic 06. Absolutely no way. Flawed, yes, but I'd say it sits more around a 7 out of 10. I'd probably plump to give it an 8, but that's me being that's me being biased. On a critical level, you're talking kind of 3 out of 5 or so, but either way. Now we get introduced to Soul Surge, which is a really cool move. Essentially allows you to kind of do a really powerful attack on your foes, just running from each of them, and it's glorious. Now, if you do what I'm doing and wait until the sword glows yellow, then you can pull off a perfect slash, or perfect hit, I suppose is what the actual term is. And doing that basically allows you to keep going with your Soul Surge, which is just so helpful. It's insane. And mastering the perfect hit is going to do absolute wonders for you as you progress throughout the game. Because not only is it going to make levels easier, it's also going to really help out on certain boss fights. So master the power of the perfect hit, please. Now, I realised I hadn't gone in to the blacksmith for the first mission, so I thought, I'll do it now. Obviously, you will have seen the item identification bit of the game, and basically that gives you these items. Not all of them can be equipped, but some of them have abilities that, passive abilities that improve the situation for you. So they can increase your defense, they can lower item identification, they can give you more points for that, they can give you extra rings, they can give you extra points. There's all these sorts of really cool things that they can do. So I would certainly recommend making use of the equipment. It's not necessary at all, you can get through the game without even taking a second glance at it, but it's certainly not going to do you any harm. The style thing is really not going to be important until the second half of the game, and really, it's not something I ever make use of. It's something that, if you wanted to complete the game, then you certainly would need to make use of, but just, no, I'm not doing it. Now, one thing I will point out in my recording for Black Knight was that I had a really odd glitchy thing happen. I don't think it was the game's fault, I think it was my Wiimote and my nunchuck's fault, because what seemed to happen is that my nunchuck kept seeming to disconnect from the Wiimote. So the game kept bringing up the menu, because obviously it was thinking, oh, nunchuck's not connected, we can't continue. And this continued for pretty much the entirety of this first half of the game. So I had to restart so many missions. It drove me insane. Because, you'd get partway through a mission, like this one, for instance, and then it disconnects, and you're just like, I want a smooth run without any menu entering. Why do you do this to me? Thankfully, it did fix itself, so it was definitely the Wiimote and not the game. But I just thought, nice little anecdote of behind the scenes of recording. Now this section's pretty easy to deal with. Just make sure that you slash when they get to about that point. They kind of hang in the air for a minute, well not a minute, but a second or two before they actually hit. So you have more than enough time to actually kill them before they do any damage. But yeah, that poor horse is probably dead right now, but we'll just ignore that and continue running.
In the remote part of the forest. That's huge. Indeed.
Now, while we make our run to the Lady of the Lake, I should probably do the history stuff for the Arthurian legend, because ultimately that is the main reason why I wanted to redo this playthrough, because I just wanted another chance to talk about medieval literature and Arthur, because, Tomb Raider Underworld, so many other things, it just makes sense. So, the earliest official source that we have for Arthur, or at least the first source that calls him King Arthur in the manner that we understand him to be, is Geoffrey of Monmouth's The History of the Kings of Britain, which is from the 12th century. And that's basically, as it states, a history of the Kings of Britain, and follows through from Brutus, who comes from Rome. It's basically a continuation of the Aeneid and the Trojan War, and, Virgil's Aeneid. So, not going from the Greek tradition, but going from the Latin tradition. And basically follows from that all the way through to Arthur.
Who the heck are you?
And he tells of his exploits. The reason that Arthur exists in that form is that Britain needed a hero, a historical hero to rally around, because at the time the French had Charlemagne, and Britain didn't really have anyone like that. And there's a few gaps in... well, there's a big gap around, I think it's 4th, 5th century or so, where we don't have any real information about the actual kings of Britain. So you can quite neatly slot Arthur into that area. And while Geoffrey of Monmouth kind of states that he has a source, which may be Nennius's Historia Britonum from 9th century, there's the potential that he may have been using another source that we have lost, but he's like adamant that it's truth. Unlikely that that's the case. But Geoffrey of Monmouth's Arthur then inspired everything else that followed. So you got Chrétien de Troyes romances, Eric and Enid, Clige, Lancelot, the Knight of the Cart, Ivan, the Knight of the Lion, and Percival, the Story of the Grail. You got the Lays of Marie de France. You got the story of Tristan and Iseult from various sources. You've got Brawl, you've got Thomas of Britain, you've got all sorts. You've got loads of romances that follow through. There were other writers that took on the history of Britain, like Wace in the Roman de Preux, also Lackerman in Brou, and kind of the last real point we have for the Arthurian cycle is Thomas Mallory's Le Morte d'Arthur in the 15th century, and that kind of pulled together most of Arthurian legend. It reinvented some of it, but it was kind of the big final thing before Arthur's story fell out of fashion, so to speak.
Being rude to the lady of the lake. Bow your head.
I think I know why you're...
Now, I will go further into this whole thing at a later point, because, I mean, otherwise I'll be continuing to repeat loads of facts, but that's the main bulk of where Arthur comes from. It's quite cool. There is the potential that Arthur existed in some form, because there's lots of Welsh folktales in which Arthur, or a character called Arthur, exists, and I remember reading a book which stated, or at least tried to make the case for the potential of a real historical Arthur, because there are people that exist in Welsh history that we have information about that sort of sound, the names sort of sound like Arthur, or could be corrupted to be Arthur. But outside of them, there's not really much that we do have. I mean, we know for a fact that, or at least I'm pretty sure we know for a fact that Uther Pendragon was made up. And then lots of characters got added to the Arthurian cycle. So initially you had maybe Gawain, Kay, and a few others, but then Lancelot was introduced to it, Percival was introduced to it, and so on and so forth. So the Arthurian story evolved over time, and I feel really bad that I just completely rambled over the Lancelot fight, but then again it was incredibly short. I like that we had a little bit of Shadow's main kind of theme, and obviously we had the Lady of the Lake, which was Amy, and also right at the start of the part, which I also kind of blanked over, was the fact that we had Tails as the blacksmith. So I really do like the fact that they came up with reasonably clever ways of bringing Sonic characters into the Arthurian mythos. It was a very clever thing that they did in Secret Rings as well, because you had Eggman as King Shahryar, you had Knuckles as Sinbad, I think. I think Tails was Alibaba, and I don't think anybody else featured. Obviously you had Sonic, but nobody else from the Sonic universe I think was there. Obviously there was Big with his holiday, but I think they did a reasonably good job with their usage in Black Knight. Because Shadow as Lancelot works very well, because come the end of Arthur's story, it is Lancelot that is the main problem, because well, at least what became the problem, because I believe it was Chrétien de Troyes introduced the Lancelot-Guinevere affair, and that became the popular narrative, rather than the original Mordred-Guinevere sort of affair, but not really an affair. Mordred being Arthur's nephew, or something along those lines. It gets confusing. But having Shadow be the pseudo-antagonistic one does work. Not so sure about Amy as the Lady of the Lake. Really, she should be sitting in more of a Guinevere status. But I suppose beggars can't be choosers in that respect. You do have some... Well, we do have other characters, because we had Knuckles as Gawain, and Blaze as Percival. Obviously, in actual Arthurian myth, Percival's male, not female, but we can forgive that, I think, because Blaze is just awesome. And I will try to go more in depth into Lancelot, Gawain, Percival as we go. But for now, I should probably talk about the fact that we are on our quest from the Lady of the Lake to do all of these missions. You only need to do certain missions, not all of them. So you need to do... I think that's the case. No, you might need to actually do all of them. So you need to do this, give money, it's not difficult. You need to do the Rampage one, which we might actually be coming on to in a minute. It varies, I think. But up to the... Oh god, when is it? So, I'm going to do every single mission available to me as they come along. So, in situations where you would otherwise just immediately go to the next story mission, if optional missions have turned up, I'm going to complete them. Apart from just before the kind of fake final boss, and then just before the final boss, I think, is where I had pauses. Well, where I had times where I didn't go do the optional missions, because I thought, well, we've built up to the finale now. I will leave that until such a time as we go into the extras, because the extras is going to be quite long and present the rest of the missions that aren't available, well, aren't necessarily available to you during the story. And good God, I am talking so much. I suppose this is what happens when you have a lot to talk about in these situations. And there really is a lot to talk about. I mean, I've hardly touched on, like, this sort of gameplay mechanic of giving the money. it's a bit pointless, but it does you good in main levels because it gives you, I think it's a chivalric deeds bonus or something along those lines, but you get more points for doing it. So in the other missions it's recommended because it will give you bonus points, which will then give you a greater chance of getting a ranking. Oh, acts of chivalry, that's the term.
That was tight.
Now I suppose I should probably talk about the followers mechanic. It's a bit weird. Essentially, as you replay levels, you will get more followers in it, and to max out your follower count, you're going to have to replay these missions quite a lot. You get more the more stars you get, but you will generally get pity followers as well. So if you start playing a mission, then either die or restart it, then you will get maybe like one follower, and that'll reach a point of like maybe 4 or 5, then it'll stop giving them to you, and you actually have to, you know, beat the level. And those followers count towards the titles, which then give you extra bonuses upon kind of getting to a new rank. Now, if you're wondering why this particular mission has a best thing in the top corner, it's because I decided to redo this particular mission because my first run was rather pathetic. I'd say it's probably the term I want to use. Like, it was very, very haphazard. I mean, this is quite haphazard as well, but like, I got hit quite a lot, and I just wasn't too impressed in the grand scheme of things. I mean, obviously I got hit there, but I just thought, no. It was one hit rather than like 6. So I thought, it's a slightly better one. It's a higher score in the end, so I'd prefer to have that rather than the mess that was the first one. But either way, that is all of the missions available to us done right now. All of our tasks for the Lady of the Lake are complete, so it's time to return, and hopefully things will be alright.
Head, fool. What's wrong?
Hey, what's the matter? Are you lost or something?
A great big dragon attacked my village.
A dragon?
It took my mommy and my daddy and everybody away.
You know where the dragon is, kid?
It's in the big cave at the bottom of that mountain.
All right, I'm on it.
Wait, don't tell me you're going off to slay a dragon now.
Yes, we are.
What of the lady's tests? You will never make it in time.
Yeah, maybe, but I play by my own rules. Remember that.
You fool.
Hang in there, kiddo. I'll get your folks back.
So, let's go get those folks back, eh?